What's going on, guys? Welcome to Garage 23, and today we're going to be painting the trunk on our S14 with some custom rattle can spray paint. Alright, so all we got left to do is to grind down all the spot welds, sand everything, primer, and then paint. So we took a little trip to Space Age yesterday and picked up all our supplies. And Space Age is awesome. They've been around for like 42 years or something. We always go to them to get our auto body supplies. And one pretty cool service that they have that I've always wanted to use but never really had the opportunity to, I guess, is that they can put the custom paint that you want mixed into a spray can. So that way if you're doing like a small area, you don't have to like mix the paint yourself or have a compressor or an expensive paint gun or anything like that. You can just have them make you a can and just spray it on like, well, like spray paint. And that's what we got here. And that's what we're gonna use to paint the trunk. But first, we need to grind down all the boogers that I put all over this thing. So let's get started doing that. Okay, first thing we need to do is get the crash bar out of the way because most of the welds on the outside are under this thing. All right, now I just take a nice abrasive wheel and grind everything off. It got a little rusty because the car was sitting outside for a bit, and of course that little bit that it was outside, it rained a bunch. So this is part of the reason we need to like clean this up and paint it and seal it up, because you don't want this to propagate and then ruin all the work that you did. So first step is to grind all the boogers down. All right, we got everything all ground down. All the little booger welds are nice and smooth. And now just gotta take some angry Scotch-Brite pad and scuff up all the painted surfaces and pretty much everything that we replaced here, just to get the primer and stuff to stick better. And then we can start laying the primer and then the color. So around where the taillight goes, there's this like thick, black, tarry, gooey stuff that Nissan uses to seal the taillight. And that is a huge pain in the ass to remove. But I found that if you get a big enough piece, you can just keep like trying to pick up all the junk that's still stuck to the panel. But I just ended up trying to sand, I pretty much just wasted a chunk of sandpaper to like sand all the residual chunk off of it, and that seems to be okay. I still think there's like little bits stuck here and there, but I mean, it's a panel you're not gonna see, so probably shouldn't worry too much about it. All right, we got everything all sanded down. Now we need to start cleaning it up. And to do that, I'm gonna use some Prep All. This is just wax and grease remover. I already blew everything off with the air hose, so now we just need to wipe it down with this stuff to make sure there's no greasy fingerprint stuff that's gonna affect our paint. So just pour some on a rag. And wipe it around. You just wanna keep track over where you're wiping because it dries off pretty quickly, so you don't wanna like wipe here a little bit and over here a little bit, and then you're not gonna remember where you were done. So just try to do it all in one sitting. Okay, next thing we gotta do is put the seam sealer on, and that is to, self-explanatory, seal up the seams of the panels that we put together. So to do that, I guess you could just brush it on or just use the caulking gun and apply it, but tape off your edges and then spread it out and then peel the tape off so you have nice crisp lines. On the inside though, if you guys remember the 4 holes in the corner of the floor pan that we used to like line up the panel, those 4 holes basically had just a piece of tape over them. And then the seam sealer was applied over the tape. So kind of like sealing the tape down and covering the hole without like getting seam sealer in the hole. So we're just gonna try and copy that and get some tape and cut a nice little square out of it. And then we're gonna use that to place over those, I guess, reference holes for the floor pan. And the other one. Then we'll just apply our seam sealer there and just brush it over to make sure it doesn't come off. Okay, now we're ready for our seam sealer. And this one I got off of Amazon because they sell this in most auto parts stores, like O'Reilly's and AutoZone and whatnot. But most of the AutoZones and O'Reilly's we checked didn't have any. So I ordered white seam sealer from Amazon. So we're gonna give this a shot. And this tube is weird because it's like sealed and stuff. So hopefully it fits in a regular caulking gun. Like a fresh can of tuna. Looks like it fits. Now I take a little spatula and spread it out. Okay, now we're just gonna give it some texture, like you're painting some happy little trees. I'm not entirely sure why you have to brush it. I'm assuming it's to like match the OEM look of the seam sealer. I kind of thought it looked better smooth, but I guess if it's kind of rough and brushed, it like hides imperfections better. I don't know. I'm just gonna do it this way because that's what I saw on YouTube. Okay, now we're done brushing it and it's sat for a little bit, just like a minute or two. I don't think you're supposed to let it dry entirely before pulling the tape off. It still needs to be a little wet. So we're gonna pull the tape off now. Yeah, so some nice, crisp, clean lines. Ready to paint over. Okay, all our seam sealers all dried up now. We're finally ready to paint. So to do that, we're gonna use some of the other stuff we picked up. And first of which is gonna be our self-etch primer. This is for use on bare metal areas only. So in sanding down some of this, obviously we had to like take everything down to bare metal, particularly the spots where we had to spot weld. So that's for those areas. And then after that, we're gonna use some high build primer. And that's just to fill in any of the other small imperfections and give us a nice surface to work with. And then we can finally hit it with our paint. All right, now we're ready for the fun part. Finally, after all this work. And that sucks how you always have to do a whole bunch of work before actually doing the fun part. Sanding, grinding, more sanding, dinner, movie. Yeah, let's get started. Right now we're ready for our second coat. And with the first coat, you always want to try and go a little lighter. It's perfectly okay if it looks a little blotchy and ugly. It's totally fine, you're just starting. You just need this first coat to stick. And this is what's gonna hold the rest of your coats, your second or third, however many you want to do, or however many you have enough for. And then it should look good after a few coats. So, time for number 2. All right, we let this sit for a few hours and it looks like it's pretty much all dry to the touch now. And I gotta admit, I was a little worried at first because with that first layer, it was looking really red. But after a couple more coats, it started to darken up and pretty happy with the results. It matches the outside pretty well. The inside, not so much. Because the thing with this spray paint that we got is that it was a single stage basically, so it has the clear mixed into it. And from factory, it looked like the paint that they used on the inside of the trunk didn't have clear coat on it. And so it was a little bit lighter. So I had to kind of like feather it out a bit as it went like up on the trunk and the stuff that we didn't replace. And I think it came out pretty good. It still looks pretty much the same color. So I'm pretty happy with that. The back end looks amazing. Like, can't even tell it was a different color at all. So pretty stoked. Now we get to put everything back together. And we also had to paint the bash bar, but while I was painting this, I got a little too excited and I was like, oh, I got some left over. So I just sprayed the rest that I had left over onto the part that we had like Bondo and stuff over and primer. So I was like, oh, cool. It just blends in a little better. And I forgot we had to paint the bash bar, so now the bash bar is just left with primer on it. Eh. All right, we're finally done. Finally got this thing all back together in one piece. And I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with the custom spray paint that we got. The color matching was like amazing. Like I did not expect it to be that accurate, but it's a good option especially if you don't have like all the equipment to paint something. But at the same time, you gotta kind of pick your battles, right? Because if you have like a large portion of the car or maybe even the whole car to paint, that probably isn't the right way to go about it. I mean, yeah, it's slightly better than like store-bought spray paint, but the finish still isn't gonna be as perfect as, you know, a proper two-part paint and like an actual paint gun with a large compressor. You're just not gonna get the same kind of finish. This is more for smaller areas, small repairs, spots that you're not really gonna see. That's where this is perfect for. We did obviously use a little bit of the leftovers on the outside of the car, and that's a good example of what I mean. Like it's good, but it's not perfect. Like it's just good enough to
hide the evidence,
as I keep saying. But it was definitely great for our application here. Like the trunk floor, which, you know, obviously nobody's really ever gonna see. It's just us that we know it's there and it's been replaced, and now it at least isn't a totally different color than the rest of the car. So I'm pretty happy about it. For the 50 bucks that we paid for the 2 cans, so it's like 25 bucks a can. I think that's a good value because a quart of paint would have probably been a similar price. Maybe a little more, probably like 80, maybe even 100 bucks depending on the kind of paint, because the price is gonna fluctuate depending on the color. But in this case, it was a little cheaper doing it this way. Granted, we probably could have used one more can, but so even at 75 bucks, it's still a comparable amount that you're paying for a can of paint versus spray cans. So yeah, I'm gonna call that a win. And we probably didn't need to go as far as like replacing the panel on this car and cutting everything out and putting new ones in, but it makes me feel better because I didn't like that, like, you would open the trunk and you'd see all this like messed up damage in there. So nobody else would really notice, but I know it was there. So the fact that it's fixed now and it's done pretty well makes me happy, and you know, that's what matters. So we're gonna call this one done, and probably just gonna start driving this car. There's nothing else we can really restore right now, so I think it's gonna be good to go. So see you guys next time, and remember, always do your best. 助けてやるか。何？助けて。嫌だ。好きだった。嫌いだ。恥ずかしい。助けてなんてやらない。Welcome to Garage 23, and this makes way too much noise.